A boil water advisory is a precautionary measure. We want to protect the public health from any bacteria, specifically disease-causing bacteria, and we call those pathogens. And those type of bacteria are going to be Klebsiella, Enterobacter, Shigella, and the main big actor is going to be E. coli. A boil water advisory would be issued if we have a main break and we lose system pressure. That means the system pressure has gone below 20 psi, and you can have contaminants that are flushed back into the water pipe. The primary reason for the boil water advisory is main breaks due to construction, or we have a hurricane and we have flooding, we have main breaks, and we lose system pressure. The secondary reason is during routine monitoring. We routinely monitor our system for coliforms and E. coli. We do 120 samples a month because we are a public water supply. So if we had an indication where we had a positive, that bacteria was present, then we would also issue a boil water notice. The health risk of consuming water that may be contaminated is that you could have illnesses due to bacteria, viruses, and parasites, and the symptoms are going to be nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. If you're an infant or you have elderlies or you're immunocompromised, then those could be severe effects, and you're going to have lung, kidney, liver illnesses, and could lead up to death. Once the boil water advisory is issued, you would immediately want to post on your faucets a sign. So that if you have little kiddos or elderly, they may forget that we have a boil water advisory. So you want to make sure everybody knows. I'd stick a sign up that says don't use the water, have some hand sanitizer, and if you're going to consume the water, you're going to cook, you're going to make ice, then that water needs to be boiled, even for hand washing and brushing teeth. But it's going to be fine for toilets, bathing, it's fine for that use. When we issue a boil water advisory, we need to make sure that you bring that water to a rolling boil for 1 minute. That's going to kill all of the microorganisms. So that's very important. Make sure you get it to a rolling boil. A boil water advisory is going to last usually from 24 to 48 hours. The duration is going to depend on how long the crews can get out there, isolate the issue. They're going to need to either make the repair under pressure, and if that can't be done, then they'll lose pressure. Then we're going to have to maintain that pressure back up at 20 psi. We'll need to make sure our chlorine residuals up to a minimum of 0.2 milligrams per liter for adequate disinfection. And then we're going to need to get out there and do some monitoring. And the monitoring itself actually takes 24 hours to incubate the sample and get results back. PWC will typically communicate a boil water advisory through e-blast. We'll use next door posts. We may, if it's isolated, we may do door to door. We'll do call outs, and then we'll also do our website. We'll post it on the website. If you have any questions, we'll also contact city, the county, and our health department. And of course, you can call in our customer service or even our laboratory staff here.
Here at PWC, we test 120 sampling stations that's required by our population. Currently, at these sample stations, we have a standard operating procedure in place that we follow to collect in a fashion that's going to be acceptable by our certification standards. We collect these samples, bring them on ice to the laboratory. We then use a color method, and that will give us a color to determine whether the sample is present or absent for coliforms and E. coli. If it is present for E. coli, we will see a fluorescence given off under a black light, and that test takes 24 hours. We also do HPC, heterotrophic plate count, that will allow us to see the growth of the bacteria over 48 hours. When we find out that there is an advisory for a boil water notice, we immediately we have a plan in place in locations that are already decided upon in the system. So we send out our lab tech and go out, collect the samples, and document the chlorine, free, residual chlorine, total chlorine, and the turbidity. At that point, he'll collect the samples and bring them back to the laboratory to be tested. And then once those go for 24 hours, we can determine whether there's coliforms present, and all the while our crews are flushing those lines, working to get those back to where it needs to be, the pressure needs to be. And in the meantime, we will go back out and check chlorines throughout the system to make sure we have at least 0.2 milligrams per liter of chlorine residual. Residents can keep bottled water on hand, make sure they have something in place to boil water if there's a power outage like during the hurricane, but you need to make sure that you boil the water for at least a minute and make sure it's a rolling boil so that any bacteria that's in there could be killed off. During their advisory, you can check on your neighbors in the community, especially if you have neighbors or friends with infants or elderly family, making sure that their water gets boiled and that they understand, the family members understands that it needs to be boiled before it's consumed, and keep with bottled water, hand sanitizer on hand for those that may not understand that the water has to be boiled. It's always a good idea to conserve water and follow PWC until the advisory is lifted. After the advisory is lifted, don't forget to flush your plumbing throughout your home. Give it a few minutes to run through just to flush the lines out. Discard any ice, and if dishes were left in the dishwasher, go ahead and run that dishwasher again. As a PWC employee, I drink the water. The water is safe to drink. I would encourage you not to be afraid to drink the water. We sample 120 sample stations a month, and the water is safe, and we adhere to the rules and regulations that we're required to by the state of North Carolina.